Welcome to the Power of Music podcast, brought to you by JM International. Get ready to explore conversations with those making a difference through music.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Power of Music podcast, provided to you by JMI, Jeunesse Musicale International, a global network of NGOs that empowers young people through music across all boundaries. Today, we are recording from the Future Music Forum in Barcelona, Spain, in a series recorded during this amazing conference. My name is Ricardo, and I'll be your host. And for this episode, I'm joined by Brian D'Souza. Brian is a sound artist, music producer, curator, and DJ based in London. He's founder of Swell Studio and Open Ear Music. Thank you so much for joining us today. First, can you tell a bit about your journey into music?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ricardo. It's great to meet you. So like a lot of people, music forms one of my earliest memories, maybe my earliest memory. It has been a large part of my life from as long as I can remember. Kids' parties, maybe when I was 8, dancing with my friends, in one room they were playing Pass the Parcel or Pin the Tail of the Donkey. Me and my friends were listening to Michael Jackson and dancing around in another room, and it just had that connection with us. Through my teenage years, I listened to all sorts of music. There's music on in my house. My parents weren't especially musical, but had a nice, wide-ranging kind of music collection. I started to dig deeper into, obviously just the pop music spectrum to begin with, but then different to my friend group, which I always thought was quite interesting. I'm not quite sure why. I started to dig a little bit deeper than them and was commonly known as the music guy in my school. My school yearbook says that, future career will always be, DJ at kids' parties or something like that. Because I was always the one that was being the DJ and putting music on. And most of the music I put on was stuff that people didn't like because, they wanted to hear pop music and all the stuff they know. But I felt closer, and I felt like I was getting more insight into the wider world, outside of my school. I mean, this is pre-internet. Or pre-internet that you could actually use functionally, certainly pre-Web 2.0. So, access to music was through, as a teenager, through magazines and reading about music, through the radio, obviously. And John Peel was a massive, massive inspiration for me, listening to him on Radio 1 every night, writing down track lists, going to my local record shop with the track list written down, not knowing really anything about the band that I was looking for, just that John Peel played one of their songs, and buying the music using my pocket money. That was a routine for me through my teenage years, and that led me to buying a lot of vinyl, because oftentimes the music that he would play would only be available on vinyl. Resulting from that was my dad gave me his turntable that he had, which then led me into the kind of, I guess, the DJ kind of world, without really kind of any kind of an intention. I was more of a hip hop guy, but kind of, pivoted into dance music just in that kind of, I guess, mid to late 90s kind of era, where I guess trance and pop trance was kind of started to become on the agenda. It was very mainstream kind of music and stuff. And I went to a festival called Tea in the Park, which was the biggest festival in Scotland. And I went there as a 15-year-old, I think, with a couple of my friends. And, Tea in the Park has built up a bad reputation. It's kind of it's actually ended now because there was just too many casualties, as they call in Scotland. Too many people pushing it too much. But me and my friends, the first year we went, we were like the geeks with the itinerary and we wanted to see everything. And I remember that was my first experience of Detroit techno. It was Jeff Mills playing. It was totally alien music to me. It's really inspirational. I didn't know why I liked it or I was drawn to it, but it was something that left a indelible mark on myself and my soul, perhaps, and that really set a sort of pathway for me to sort of try and discover more about that particular type of music and more about dance music in general. And I started to I got the second turntable and the mixer, and didn't really know why I needed to, but I kind of figured out after I got the turntables that it was to do with mixing and blending the records together. And then I started to DJ, and that led on to promoting parties and doing all that stuff. At university, I met other people that were also DJs. Everyone seemed to be a DJ at that point. And we put on some really great parties, like book some acts or heroes. And, we'd get some good stories to tell around that period of time. But at that time, I also started to produce music and really found these connections with how I can make music and connect with people and make my own music. And that be an extension of myself. So that was kind of like my early days. And, I've since had, pretty much a 20-year career in music, wearing a multitude of different hats. One of those was kind of like birthed through my psychology degree. I was always interested in how the psychology of music worked. I did an experiment in my second year when we were finally given free reins to design our own experiments, where I tested people performing a task, a spatial task. It was, how fast they could complete a maze. And I had different music settings. So I had them in a small kind of lab room, different music. It was fast, slow. It was repetitive, non-repetitive. It was silence, as a baseline, and it was timing people to do the task. And I found significant results. And the fastest, times to do the maze was the fast-paced, essentially techno music, very repetitive. And the slowest was actually the silence setting, because I think that we're surrounded by sound all the time, and with the absence of sound, and this was a very quiet room, people felt very subconscious, and that was then something that interrupted their abilities to focus on the task at hand. So I took those kind of principles and started to think, well, actually, this music is really kind of like triggering lots of responses, and a lot of that is on people's kind of subconscious or unconscious kind of brain. And through university, I was DJing in bars and restaurants and things like that, just to pay my way. And it's a very different experience DJing in a restaurant or bar to playing in a club, because club is essentially an active listening experience for a lot of people. Very engaged with that. There's no escape. The sound is so loud that it's everywhere. Whereas in a restaurant or a bar, it's background. It's there. It's supporting you to have a conversation, a meal, a drink, or whatever. And I was really fascinated by that, because I was like, if I do a good set and I just can, innately know that this is a good set, I can feel it's a good set, then I've got a busier restaurant or bar at the end of the night. And I was like, this is happening, and this is happening, psychological effect is happening without people knowing it's happening, and that led me to then research a lot about how music affects, different states of consciousness, and drives different behaviors as well. And that gave birth to my first proper company, called Open Ear Music, which is a company I've ran for 16, 17 years. I actually just exited this year. That was a music consultancy business. We work with brands, we work with commercial spaces. We essentially design what we don't like to call background music. We've built a whole playlisting kind of engine and system delivery mechanism, for that type of paradigm. And yeah, it's been very successful. We work with thousands of businesses around the world. It's what I've noticed over the period was, when we started, it was like the iPod had just come in. People had immediately a lot more access to music, but they didn't really know, past the music that they kind of knew, which was fairly limited, like how to then curate for, the entirety of a day or a week or months on end. So that was where we came in. It was to say, well, actually, we're music nerds, we're geeks. We know how to find the music that suits you, that can create an identity for your brand, for your space, that create the right atmosphere for your customers, and can then be programmed at certain, to reflect the different times of day, the different moods, what you're trying to say about your business, throughout the week and throughout the months and stuff. So that was the business model. I mean, it was an industry that, music, etc., had been existing for 100 years since the birth of recorded music. But it was a lot to be desired at that particular time, because everyone was just playing shitty pop music, excuse my language, but everyone was playing the same stuff. And I was like, why do you spend so much money on visually, your business looking amazing and the interior design and everything that you're seeing, but sonically, it's an afterthought. It's the last thing you've ever thought about. It's the same. It's very generic, derivative, and it's not really saying anything. And I was like, well, the power of music is that you can really tell a story with that. And it's as well as that, it's this uniquely powerful tool to drive different behaviors. And what do you want your customers to do? Do you want them to stay longer? Do you want them to stay shorter? Do you want to turn over the tables faster? Do you want them to chew faster? Do you want to buy more expensive things on the menu, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these psychological studies that we've done around the power of music in this kind of realm, and those are all fascinating. And I think over the last, say, 18 years since I've been running, 17, 18 years since, I've been doing this business, people are aware of that. It's largely speaking intuition, but it's some of this stuff has been kind of widely publicized. So that's a great thing. And actually, what you see now is like the sonic environment, the soundscape of commercial space is vastly improved, and that's people doing it themselves through Spotify and whatever else, or it's working with companies such as Open Ear. So that's been a large part of my professional career. That was my day job. My night job was still continuing my DJ work. My weekend job was doing that. So it was like playing clubs, festivals. I had an artist named called Anti-Flow. Released 3 albums, many EPs, toured the world, played at every club, festival, etc. And loved it. Absolutely loved it. Continued to do that. Maybe not as much as what I did, pre-COVID. And that actually for me came along at the right time because I was experiencing a bit of burnout, and was the right time to transition into doing what I'm doing now more so, which is a company called Swell, and that was based on partly through my experiences in music psychology that I talked about, but also I trained in sound therapy as a sound therapist with the British Academy of Sound Therapy, and that was really interesting to me because it kind of it really kind of helped to define a lot of the stuff that I'd already kind of knew and picked up along the way, which was around music listening and the musical paradigm and music composition. And it broke it down into constituent parts. It broke it down into frequency, it broke it down into intervals, it broke it down into different mechanisms that could be used to then affect brain and body. And that to me was like, okay, I get all this. This is like really close to what I've already been doing, what I really understand, but it kind of framed it in a way that I thought was quite interesting. And I didn't really want to be a sound therapist, a practitioner in terms of like conducting ceremonies or sessions or whatever. But what I did want to do is kind of learn from, the principles that underlie that discipline, and then apply that into this kind of general realm of sound within health, within mental health, and how then that can be applied, basically through technologies or through site-specific installations or whatever it is, that can then help positively affect people in terms of brain and body state, whether that's for simply just relaxation, but there's so much more to it than that. It's exploring different realms of consciousness. It's providing a inspiration. It's allowing you to unlock that flow state, which relates back to my name, Anti-Flow. It's always something that was inspirational to me, is important place for us to try and strive to be in, if we can, in our busy lives. So yeah, that's sort of potted history of my career to date.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. Like I don't even know where to start. Maybe let's start at the beginning, at your DJ career, because when you select the songs as a DJ, do you have similar things in mind that you have right now? Like, are you actually concerned with how is this going to affect people's consciousness, or how in this way? And I'm saying it in a kind of joking way, but I can imagine that if you know a lot about the psychology and you know about what happens, not in a mechanical way, but just in a way of like creating an experience, how does that relate to that part?
I think a lot of the stuff is kind of intuitive, like, to anyone that works within music, they kind of get it. And I think we all are, even if you aren't a musician or don't work in music, we're all expert listeners to greater or lesser degree, but, we understand music. Music is kind of ubiquitous. It's there with us since birth. We're actually innately musical beings, something I talk about quite a lot, but like, we start listening while we're in the womb, the third trimester. The first things we hear are rhythms, like our mother's heartbeat and speech patterns, etc. So we fundamentally, as human beings kind of understand like musicality. And that's really, really important, because then that allows us to kind of understand, more complex, obviously we start off as kids, nursery rhymes, etc., very simplistic, and then we develop, and strive to kind of experience more and more complex pieces of music. And obviously different people have different places on that bell curve that they reach. Some people don't get very far past maybe their teenage years and whatever they listen to there, and other people, like, it's a lifelong journey, whatever, and probably place myself in that camp. But there's limitations to that. So yeah, in terms of like how I'd approach a DJ set, it has to be in the moment. I mentioned this kind of state of flow. I think that's really, really important, because it's a symbiotic, relationship driven thing. what pains me is learning about DJs that sort of pre-prepare sets and press play and, you know, that kind of thing as a kind of stage show. That's entirely different from what I see as being the DJ paradigm. And I think like DJing is you connecting with an audience at a level that's non-verbal. It's about an exchange, and the audience is as important as you playing the songs, and the audience leads you as much as you lead them. So it's a relationship driven thing. And what I love about it is, and what I've experienced is how that breaks down all sorts of barriers, you know, like certainly language, you know, go to different countries, different language, different, you know, we can connect, different, all sorts of things that it would just sort of transcend, and you essentially you in the dance floor on the best nights, obviously it doesn't happen every time, then you can really create a kind of synergy with yourself and the audience to bring them into a place, or bring yourselves into a place of awe and wonder and you know, self-actualization and all these kind of things, you know, pure human happiness or whatever that we can all strive for throughout our lives. And I think that's sort of powerful, really, and very fundamental. And it's often something that's overlooked because we think of you know, clubbing as like a hedonistic kind of thing. Obviously it is, and part of that is good. There's also a downside of that, you know. There's all sorts of insidious kind of commercial interests and you know, like other kind of factors that kind of play in that divert, you know, from what can be a very beautiful and very meaningful experience. So yeah, in terms of like pre-preparing, like, or thinking too much about the psychology, no, because it has to exist in the moment. But understanding the principles are, I guess, something that is informed the way I approach things.
I love that you use specifically the terms awe and wonder. I've been recently very interested in the research on awe, wonder, and the downside of awe and wonder is horror, as experiences that are inherently self-transcendent and actually very participatory experiences that actually can change identity. And I think that music has that power, but a lot of people forget about that. So I'm really happy you bring that up, because that's very, very relevant. Something else, before we went live on the podcast, we talked a little bit about your kind of music being heavily influenced by kind of different cultural music from all over the world, which I think is cool for two reasons. One, within JMI, Ethno is one of the biggest programs where students teach each other music from their tradition. So they fly into, you know, whatever, Chile and learn Chilean music, but also teach Malawian music or whatever, German music to each other. And I think there's so much power in that. And second, especially if you blend it with more kind of modern sounds, it brings that music to people that they forget. Like, I'm always eternally grateful for Madlib for introducing me to certain, you know, like Ethiopian music or Brazilian music. So can you say a bit about the power of that music specifically and why that's so attractive to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it was kind of fundamental in terms of how I carved out a niche for myself with my anti-flow alias. We set up a club night back in 2010, I think, called High Life, and it was really trying to bring a different flavor of club culture into where we were based, which was Glasgow, which was really heavily, in like a lot of cities at that time and probably around the world, well, certainly in the UK, let's say, that, you know, it was heavily kind of biased towards music from Berlin, Germany at large, like music from Detroit, music from Chicago, music from New York, and music from UK. And that's all beautiful music, and it's great, and I love that, and I've spent a lot of time listening, and I have a big collection in that types of music. But what I would start to do as a personal thing was discover all this music from all over, like outside of that sort of Western canon, let's say. And, you know, I was listening to, you know, a lot of, say, South African house before I'm a piano, you know, there's, you know, absolutely incredible kind of stuff coming out there, or, you know, music coming out of Chile, like you mentioned, in Argentina and across Latin America or whatever, with different rhythms, different flavors, but still obviously influenced by some Chicago house, for example, or whatever. Like, you know, there's the story of South African like house music was a lot of the DJs were kind of buying up this, I believe, the Chicago house music and then pitching it down, so it's like slow, so it created that kind of quieto kind of like you know, like slower kind of sound. So there was already this kind of cross-pollination pre-internet of these musical styles. You know, Afrobeat was James Brown influence, you know, Fela Kuti, etc., bringing over some of the British influence from his education, but bringing it back and creating something new and something very uniquely, you know, uniquely West African, or uniquely Nigerian, or uniquely Fela. You know, it's always this kind of dichotomy of like, is it the artist, or is the artist representative of their location or their scene, or etc. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, and I think it's been slightly kind of a point of dismay when people get too bogged down in things like cultural appropriation, which I think is an issue. And obviously, if it can be an absolutely negative thing. There's obviously a balance to be had with a lot of these kind of things. Unfortunately, the world we live in right now, nuance and kind of giving people the benefit of the doubt is something that can quite often be lacking. And this whole kind of binary culture that we've kind of created for ourselves, or we now exist in, can be quite privative. Because if you think that my experiences when I've traveled and I've connected with people through music, and they want to connect with me through music, and it's a really great, beautiful kind of equal relationship. And as long as you make sure that you maintain the equalness of that relationship, then there's nothing appropriating about it. It's about appreciation. It's about coming together. It's about making the world a smaller place, and it's about connection. And that is something that music can do quicker than anything else, and that's beautiful. And, for people to maybe, I don't know how much this is happening, and hopefully not too much, but if that process stops because they're worried about appropriating that music or doing something to, not culturally sensitive, then I think that's disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah. What is this power you think that communication through music or connecting through music is sometimes so easy for people that speak that language?
I mean, we're all connected as human beings because we're all vibrating, fundamentally. So there's this thing inside us that allows us to connect through sonics, sound vibrations, etc. If an alien came down and landed on planet Earth and listened to the different musics and the genres and everything that we've created for ourselves, there's so many similarities. And actually, there was a meta-analysis that I think Harvard put together a few years ago around the universality of music, and they came up with 4 broad genres that humankind is across many different kind of cultures that they were able to study has as similar. So they created they found out that there was dance music, mm-hmm. broadly speaking. There was love songs, broadly speaking. There was lullabies, so sleep songs, and there was healing songs. And since I talked to quite a lot of people about this, and they say, well, what about this and what about that, and that's right. There's probably outliers, of course, but broadly speaking, these are the genres or the categories of music that we've created for ourselves as human societies, and they are universal in the sense of you go to different places in the world, and they will have their own love songs or their own healing songs, and there'll be similarities in terms of how they were composed because they have the functional impact of helping to make people go to sleep or helping to make people heal, etc. Or dance. I mean, it's such a huge thing. So I always look at dance music as actually like that kind of very holistic kind of thing across. And the way that I've approached DJing is to not really be so hell-bent on different genres. I know that's very commonplace now, but when I started, it wasn't at all. Mm-hmm. It was very much like you're this person playing this type of music, and that's your tech house versus deep house versus this, and it was like you had to choose your side, and you had to choose your tribe as well. And it's a good thing that happens less and less, and it's much more about people being able to play a wide range of different stuff. So yeah, I think that's positive.
For sure. Let's go a bit further into your conversation, go to Swell, because that's a very interesting concept. So maybe you can share a bit about what is the vision for Swell. So where do you want to stand in a few years?
I mean, I think that I've always been interested in how music and sound affects our consciousness, our brain, our body, our physiology, etc. So at the most basic level, it's an exploration into that, for me personally. The challenge for any business is what's the commercial business model for that? At the moment, Swell is, essentially exists as a kind of consultancy business. So we work across different kind of industries. It's been funny, not with any great design or intention. It's just through serendipitous encounters, and it's through a little bit of my network over the last 20 years. But so we've ended up, doing a broad range of different projects, from working with skincare brands and hotel spas for massage, so deep relaxation, and it's creating an environment that matches the scent, smell, the actual skincare product itself with what you hear and what you see, etc. So that's been really interesting. We've created like swell rooms, so an actual, you can go to a swell room and have a vibroacoustic sonic massage. So you actually sit on a chair that has speakers in the chair, and you feel the sound as well as hearing the sound through headphones. And that's like a 20-minute bookable experience. And then we've also worked with in the kind of general kind of field of health, but with psychedelics institutes. So Imperial College in London, they're one of the leading kind of institutions for researching psychedelic therapy. So curating music for, in this case, a chronic pain study. So people who suffer from treatment-resistant chronic pain, and music is an integral part of the psychedelic experience for that. And we've delivered a kind of technology piece that designs the playlist and delivers the playlist for that kind of experience. And then we've done some brand work as well. So recently working with ASICS shoes, for example, their pitch was, we want you to build a track that's the most motivational song of all time. I was like, okay, yeah. which was a little bit of a challenge, especially when you've got a million different cooks from different agencies in the mix. But it was an interesting project nonetheless.
Succeed? Most motivational
I guess time will tell. But personally, I think what was interesting is they'd done a little bit of kind of, I maybe shouldn't be saying this, maybe they're going to hear this, but there was a little bit of pop psychology kind of research that got into it, like this frequency is going to motivate. This type of sound aesthetic is going to help to inspire and stuff. And a lot of that stuff is actually, what we're trying to achieve as well, is to really unpack, is there a truth in this? Is there empirical evidence to back that up? Or are we just talking about someone's, oft-shared memes that has then become scientific fact or something like that? So, that's an open question. Does a frequency of 111 hertz, I think it was, work on releasing endorphins? I think in isolation, no, it doesn't. I mean, it's obviously I haven't studied it, in great detail, but I don't think it does, because I think music exists within relationships and how frequencies of sound relate to each other, but also to the listener as well. And every person's physiology is different. So it's very difficult to come up with, specific frequencies and this does this and this does that. But there are commonalities. And like I talked about with the musical genres, there are obviously, we have centuries of understanding relationships between musical notes, intervals, and how certain intervals, frequencies can be more harmonious and consonant, and vice versa, dissonant, and a bit more challenging and stuff. So largely speaking, they are universal kind of things that we can play off from. So there is certainly something there, but there's a lot more work to be done to really kind of understand it, which is the point of fascination for me. So in terms of answering your question, in terms of the vision, it's really to answer these questions. It's to really kind of go, what is the power of music? How does it work? Is there answers there that we can use for the good of society, for individuals? And if there are, let's use technology as well. That's the other part of it. We talked before, generative and AI technologies are really interesting, and I think that's a large part of music's future. And if they can be used for the power of good, such as helping people, with their mental and even physical health, then yeah, absolutely, that's an interesting area to explore.
And talking about these big questions and some of the pop psychology that's out there, I also think this is a fascinating area. As I told you before the podcast, we're currently exploring the relationship between personality traits and uses of music and kind of preferences within tempo and these kind of things, which I think is fascinating. But I think there's many bigger and more interesting questions to be answered. If you look at maybe the current research that's coming out, or the potential that you see that's kind of unfolding with new emergent technologies and AI and generative music, what questions or what answers that you feel are getting closer are you most excited about, or what that just came out, it's that's amazing?
I think where I see it is there's the kind of biological basis almost for music. You have biometric kind of inputs, and I think that's really interesting. Is like the fundamental thing that I guess Swell is sort of striving for is to help people become better listeners, and I mean active listeners. I think that in this world that we've created for ourselves, active listening as a discipline, as a practice, as a skill is being lost, because we have so many distractions, like we are constantly getting pushed and pulled in different directions. We've constantly got too many things on our to-do list. So taking the time and having the dedication to listen and actively listen as almost like, comparable to a mindfulness practice or a version of mindfulness is, I think, really important. And the way in which music from the birth of, say, recorded music has then transitioned it to becoming a more of a passive experience. We talked before about my open ear business. It's very much the soundtrack to another activity that you're doing. So therefore it's in the background, and there's obviously value in that, but there's probably more value to be found in one becoming an active listener and being able to be really engaged in that moment, outside of stresses from, the past and stresses of what's to come. So if we can help people to become more active in their listening, and I think the solution is, and this is where the technology piece comes in, being able to participate in that. So that's either through what I said before, the biological basis of like literally your biology is informing the music that you're listening to, or you're able to, using different tools, co-create, the music, even if you're a non-musician. Then that should, in theory, I think, like hopefully inspire you to, or encourage you to be active in that process. And I think once you get to that point, like, then it's about like understanding what do you want to then achieve from this. And then you start to unlock all the myriad of benefits that music can then bring, We've talked about a few of them already, but it can not just be for the purposes of just pure relaxation. Obviously that's good, and sleep, that's obviously good, and lots of people have sleep problems, but really in terms of like cognitive abilities, inspirational moments, I think like something I think about a lot is like when you've had your most inspiring ideas in your life, it's when you're on holiday, or it's when you're on the toilet or something, or in the shower, the classic thing. And it's like, why is that? It's because, you're away from, your normal everyday environment, your neuroplasticity is increased. So if we can use music to unlock that, then, we can help inspire and create like better kind of, cognitive processes and more inspirational thoughts and ideas and stuff like that. So that's what I'm interested in.
Me too. I'm very curious what's going to happen. And I'd love to talk to you about this for another like hour or two, but I know you have a panel to catch as well. You need to speak. We both need to speak soon. Just quickly, if people want to find you, connect with you, or want to find out more about Swell, where can they find Swell? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so Swell's website is swellstudio.io. You can sign up for the newsletter there. And then we can connect. My email address is brian@swellstudio.io. And then we're across socials, Anti-Flow. And I run a radio station called Ambient Flow. It's a bit of a lockdown project, but ambientflow.com. 24 hours a day, free to listen. You can support us on Patreon as well if you want. But yeah, go and check that out as well.
Nice. As always, the last question. What is the power of music?
How long do we have? I guess we've covered a lot of that, but music is the power of music is absolutely key to humanity, and it's key to humanity's future. So we need to pay attention to it, and we need to respect it, and we need to do as much as we can to keep it in schools and education and within, a part of our lives. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. If you want more information about JM, or you would like to get involved, visit www.jmi.net. At JMI, we are on a mission to make the world more musical. That's why we created Mubazar, a digital platform that helps us manage all our musical activities across 80 countries worldwide, connecting musicians with opportunities to grow both personally and professionally. If you are a music professional looking for a better way to manage and promote your music activities, check out Mubazar. Created for music organizers, by music organizers, Mubazar allows you to run music competitions, workshops, camps, auditions, masterclasses, awards, events, and much more. Mubazar offers custom application forms, payments for your activities, jury tools, translations, analytics, and more. Mubazar is fast becoming the best place for musicians to find and apply for music opportunities online, and you can sign up today for a free organizer account by going to www.mubazar.com, registering, and then requesting to upgrade to an organizer on the right-hand menu. For more info, don't hesitate to get in touch via support@mubazar.com. It would mean a lot to us if you could give us 1 minute of your time and rate and review the podcast. In case you have any suggestions or would like to be one of our next guests, feel free to reach out to us through the JMI socials.